Welcome to Coding for Fun. We will be learning about if-else statements in Python programming. Even though these are very basic concepts, they are essential to any programming language that you go on and learn. Granted, the syntax for each language is different, but the basic premise of when and how to use the if-else statements is the same across all of them. These function basically as conditional statements that when they're true, it tells the program to execute a certain part of the code. And if it's not true, it skips that part of the code and goes on to something else. I'll probably make a couple videos on if-else statements, and I'll talk about the basics, and then we'll delve into a couple real-life examples of how to use them. You can actually follow along, and I think this will be beneficial to all beginners and intermediate people out there in terms of they'll have a program that they can reference where they use these basic concepts and also be able to share it on GitHub, as keeping track of the programs you make is very important for all developers, as that acts now as your virtual resume. So let's get started. So the goal of this video will be to use if-else statements to make a program that functions like a calculator. We're gonna provide it with two numbers and then choose whether it be addition, subtraction, multiplication, or division, and have it calculated for you. So that's all gonna be possible by if-else statements. So before we go into the program, I just want to give a brief overview and basics of how to use if-else statements. And as you can see, I'm using the Jupyter Notebook. If this is what you want to use, you can download it using the Anaconda package. Otherwise, you can use whatever idle program you have. You can use Sublime, PyCharm. You can use even the idle that comes with Python when you download it. I prefer to use Jupyter Notebook because that way I can break down my code and see it run, but some people like using other ones, so that's strictly based on personal preference. So if-else statements, as I mentioned before, are conditional statements that check to see if something is true. So let's start off by declaring a variable a and set it to apple. And then let's provide another variable b and set that to orange. Now we're going to use a if statement. The correct syntax in Python is you will put if, and then you're going to put your comparative value there. So on here, if I say if a is equal to b, I end it with 2 colons, and then I press enter. And most idle programs or most text editor programs you used is going to automatically indent it, but that's very important in Python to make sure to indent things correctly. So if a is equal to b, print, you have the same fruit. So if we were to run this code, we would expect nothing to happen because we can see that a is not equal to b, as a is apple and b is orange, and if we run this, we don't expect it to print that statement. So if I run it now, nothing happens, and that's what we expected. But if we add a else statement and say print, you have different fruit, we would expect that line of code to run, as a is not equal to b. So if that part of the code isn't true, I want to do something else, and that's what that else statement is saying. So if we run this, it says you have different fruit. Now if we were to change this to if a is equal to apple, the code is going to come down, it's going to check the if statement, and if if the if statement is correct, it's never going to make it down to the else statement. And that's what happens. You have the same fruit. And just one thing I want to mention before we go further is you can see that when I was comparing in my if statement, when I was writing that comparative statement, we used two equal signs. And then that's important to keep in mind, as in Python, whenever you're declaring a variable, you just use one equal sign, as I'm setting my variable A equal to the string, which is apple, and my variable B equal to the string, which is orange. But inside of my comparative statement, we would use two equal signs. So that's very important to keep in mind. And with this example, you can see we just have one if statement. But in real life, you can have as many as you want. And the program will check each of them in a sequential order. So right now we have if A is equal to apple, print you have the same fruit. So let's update this and say print you have an apple. And now let's make another if statement. If B is equal to orange, then print you have an orange. So if we look at this code, we can see that our two if statements are true. A is equal to apple and B is equal to orange. So we would expect both of these statements to print. And when we run it, that's what happens. So you can see here that depending on what you want to look for, you can have different if statements, and then if the if statements are not met, then it's going to go to the else statement to print this out. You can also combine things and compare more than just one thing. So let's get rid of this one here and say if A is equal to basketball, which we know is not true, or B is equal to orange, which is true, we want to say you have a fruit here. And when we run this, that's what we're getting, because what's happening is it's checking the first variable, if A is equal to basketball, which it's not, and then it's checking B if that's equal to orange, and it is. So it's printing that statement. Now, if we changed the or to an and, this would no longer be true, because A is obviously not equal to apple, but B is, but we need both statements to be true in order for this to proceed and print this line of code. So when we run this, we get the else statement, which is you have different fruit. So you can see that even within an if statement, you can look at and compare multiple statements within it and multiple variables, and based on what you're using, such as and or, it could dictate how and what the code is going to do based on what is coded. I think this would be a good spot to stop this video. If you guys have any questions on the basics of if and else statements, please feel free to leave them in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and remember to subscribe. In the next video, we will go into actually developing that calculator-like program using if-else statements. So please make sure to continue coding and understanding how if-else works. And until then, keep on coding.